Recommendations suggest that frontline NHS staff should be specially trained to recognise the signs of domestic violence. Almost 2 million women and men are abused each year, but with many attacks going unreported, it's feared the figure could be higher. We spoke to Sarah, who was beaten by her former husband.
It might be 7 or 10 punches to the face and head, and then he would stop. And I actually thought, oh, he stopped. And then he continued with 7 or 8 punches again, and then he would stop. And at this stage, all I kept screaming was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I actually didn't know what I was sorry for, but I just wanted him to stop. He strangled me twice, so the first time he strangled me, and then let go. But when he went in the second time, I actually thought he was going to kill me, because it was, you know, his thumbs were right in, and for me, I just kept thinking about my child. For those 10 seconds or so, I really believed that I was going to die, and the only thing that went through my head was that my child is upstairs and my child, you know, won't know what's happened. I think signs would have helped. I think information in public places would have prompted me to question what was happening in my life, and then eventually have the confidence to speak to somebody.
So that was a victim of domestic abuse, Sarah, speaking there. Obviously her identity has been disguised. The domestic abuse lawyer Rachel Horman joins us from central London. Good morning to you. How much of a difference do you think that this would make?
I think it really will make a massive difference. Often people in health centres and at hospitals are the only people really that get access to victims of domestic abuse and have the ability to get them on their own, because often victims of domestic abuse aren't allowed out on their own and are often accompanied by the perpetrator. So it does make common sense that these professionals are trained to some extent in domestic abuse, that they ask the questions most importantly, because often my clients will say they've turned up at A&E with a black eye and nobody's asked them how it's happened. So it's really important to ask that question, but then to know where to refer the person to.
Well, and that's the important thing, isn't it, about is there enough support for that next stage to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot of support out there. There are many charities that specialise in assisting victims of domestic abuse, such as Women's Aid and Paladin, that have been campaigning for a specific domestic violence offence. So provided the health professionals know where to refer to, then the victims can really be helped.
And from the point of view of the figures that we're talking about here, obviously we've got a difference between the reported figures and the actual figures, and really there could be a huge difference between those two, couldn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I see lots of clients that have never reported it to the police or anybody else for that matter. On average, a woman is assaulted 35 times before she goes to the police. So if you think of it in that way, the vast majority of domestic abuse is never reported.
And we're not just talking about women here, of course, are we? There are men who are victims of domestic abuse as well.
Men and children, yes, but the far biggest group of people is women. But yes, men can be victims as well, and sometimes it can be hard for them to feel confident to come forward about it.
And listen, you obviously see the victims of this when they're ready to go through that legal system. What is it then that stops people getting that far, getting to that stage?
Well, at the moment there isn't a criminal offence of domestic violence, so sometimes victims will go to the police and then are told, well, unless he hits you, there's nothing we can do to help. So they then feel very let down by the whole system. So if the new domestic violence offence does come to fruition, then victims will be able to get help at the early stage, hopefully before it gets to serious violence.
So are you confident that the changes that are being proposed are going to be enough? Does a more widespread overhaul of the system, is that needed?
Very much. It's been needed for a long time. As I say, the new offence will deal with psychological abuse, which a lot of women actually will say is worse than the physical abuse, because if you have a bruise, then you can show that to someone and feel like people will believe you. But the psychological abuse, they feel, is worse. It grinds them down, and at the moment there isn't a criminal offence to deal with that, unbelievably.
Rachel Horman, their domestic abuse lawyer, thank you.